New data suggests that Gen Z is more likely than other generations to completely reject what is called traditional morality, and they're less likely than previous generations to believe that human beings are fundamentally good. Okay. They don't believe in human beings having good in them inherently. I think that this might just be something they're indoctrinated with, because I think you're born with the belief that people are good. But that's just my thought.
There's a $20 one here real quick that says, when men were men and women were women and small furry creatures were small furry creatures.
Thank you for this anti-furry take.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I actually looked into this survey. It got responses from 2,000 adults in January 2024, comparing their views on moral behaviors. So they asked a lot of these hypothetical questions. Is it morally acceptable to tell a falsehood of minor consequence in order to protect your personal best interests or reputation? 60% of Gen Z says that's morally acceptable, compared to 48% of boomers.
Clearly, that right there refutes the idea of morality at all.
Well, they look at themselves to judge humanity. They're like, I'm kind of
They're ridiculous.
a backstabbing liar, so
They're
I'm
idiots.
sure most people are. And is it morally acceptable to have an abortion for any reason other than to protect the life of the mother or child? I don't know why you would have an abortion to protect the life of the child, but okay.
Maybe they're yeah, okay. Go on.
69% of Gen Z supports this, whereas only 61% of boomers do, and 59% of Gen X. This shocked me, this next one. 73% of Gen Z thinks it's morally acceptable to have consensual sex with someone to whom you are not legally married.
I thought that number would be higher.
I would too.
I did.
So that's a shocking amount, actually.
Yeah, I thought it would be in the high 90s.
Yeah, so I guess 27% of Gen Z thinks that premarital sex is immoral. It's kind of shocking to me. Whereas 59% of boomers would say that that's morally acceptable.
Yeah.
This is one of the biggest gaps, though, is deciding not to repay a loan because the person lending the money has not yet asked to be repaid and doesn't need the money back.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
25% of boomers said that that's morally acceptable,
Jesus.
compared to 50% of Gen Z.
Those people have zero understanding of morality. Or
The boomers or Gen Zers?
Anyone who said yes
Gen Z,
to this, anyone who thinks that that's acceptable.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, support for gay marriage was interesting too, because Gen Z has the same level of support for gay marriage as the boomers, but the millennials support it the most. Mm-hmm. So this is just bearing out that Gen Z is reacting against the push for LGBT acceptance everywhere at all times, pride parades, Dylan Mulvaney and the like. They're going back to, I guess, more traditional morality on some of these issues. Thank you.
I mean, I think that's just a response to the hard push.
Yeah, I think that it's a response to the fact that there's over 100 days in the year that are celebrating. That's one third, almost one third of the year. 1/3 of the year, you're celebrating some kind of sex thing, some kind of weird sex fetish. That's because that's all it is. It's just who you like to have sex with. It's at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I don't care. I don't care at all who you like to have sex with. You can have sex with whoever you want. I don't want to go to a party about who you have sex with.
There's this girl, Isabel Brown, I believe is her name, who recently wrote a book about Gen Z and like why we shouldn't be blackpilled about them.
Okay.
And there's actually hope for Gen Z. It's called The End of the Alphabet, I think.
Okay.
And, you know, I think you can bring up a lot of stats to make Gen Z either look bad or look good. But she said that, you know, Gen Z is returning to church and they're you know, going back to a faith that they weren't raised in compared to other generations. Like, this is a good sign. They're returning to religious practice. But then this says millennials and Gen Z have largely dismissed Christianity as an irrelevant faith.
I think the organized religion part of it is what they're pushing back against. Yeah.
But then she says like, oh, they're more church going than millennials. I don't know if that's true.
I don't know if I buy that.
I don't know. Yeah, they're coming to the same conclusion as the Bible. People are not basically good. I would disagree that is the conclusion you would get from the Bible.
Okay.
And since boomers were raised more religious than Gen Zers, but they still believe humanity is basically good. That doesn't seem to follow for me. But you mentioned that they didn't even define the age cohorts very well.
No,
here.
they didn't. That
so
was
maybe this
the first...
isn't something that's like super reliable.
That was one of the first problems with it is that, so they said the survey categorized respondents aged 22 to 40 as millennials and saying that Gen Z is defined as adults between the ages of 18 and 21. No.
So that pretty much cuts out like half of Gen Z.
Because that would make you a millennial by this definition.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
You're also cutting out the amount of Gen Zers who are still not legally adults.
Yeah.
Too.
Yep.
And I would guess that they're like way more bigoted than boomers are, given the data about at least Gen Z males.
Yeah.
They're way more conservative, and then the Gen Z females are way more liberal, and they're going completely opposite directions.
Yeah, whereas the millennials were generically more liberal.
Yeah, I mean, it used to just ebb and flow, and males and females in certain generations would just be like more conservative in this day and age, and then more liberal in this day and age. But now it's just going like completely opposite. Which is worrying.
It makes sense that would happen given that marriage rates have fallen and traditionally maybe your views fall in line more with your husband, with you and your spouse might start seeing the world in a similar way. Now nobody has that anchor to the world that gives them that.
I think it's social media.
Yeah.
Honestly, because the influencers who are talking to young women are much different than the influencers talking to young men.
And both of them are blaming the other gender for all the problems.
It's very gendered. Like, the young men are listening to Andrew Tate or Sneeko, or they're, God forbid, watching Kai Cenat.
I'd rather they watch Kai Cenat.
And what are the young women watching? What are they consuming? Who is appealing to Gen Z women right now on social media? I don't even think that she would
makeup
count.
Influencers, true crime.
True crime makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just seems like social media.
They don't even necessarily need, though they do have influencers talking about feminism, because feminism is baked into every aspect of our culture. So that does not matter.
Right.
Like, they don't need somebody inherently. If anything, that might be less effective. It's more effective to just kind of bake it into every aspect of culture than it is to have somebody in your face telling you that this is true. It doesn't work for the men because there isn't an inherently masculine aspect of society that's baked into everything, except for the actual things that keep society running, but that doesn't get any attention.
I think the most striking thing about this is the difference between Gen Z and millennials in terms of their views on gay marriage. Because I think millennials like prided themselves on being the generation that saw that civil rights victory.
Yep.
And, gave themselves the credit for that, even though it was a Supreme Court decision, which is wild. But, that was like the last frontier of the civil rights victories of U.S. history. And now we've just gotten to like cutting kids' dicks off.
Yeah.
And Gen Z doesn't have any interest in being, activists on that level.
Oh, I don't know. It's the opposite. I think that everything that's coming today is because they feel cheated out of the what they consider the last civil rights victory. So they're making up new things to be upset
Palestine
about.
is probably the next thing.
No, it is. It's
probably,
it's anything that doesn't have to do with here, because everything here that they fought for, they can continue to bitch about.
Everything is turbo lib in America.
Yes.
So you can't get any more progressive
and it
than
doesn't
we are
matter.
now.
It doesn't have it doesn't have a course because it's just whatever's in the news right now. So 2 years ago it was BLM. or 4 years ago it was BLM. Then it was wearing a mask.
It's the climate and Palestine right now.
Yeah.
We have to pick social causes that are completely outside of our realm of control.
Unsolvable.
Such a joke.
Because then
By
you can
design.
just pick a villain and the problem will never be solved. It's the perfect activist choice.
It's by design.
Yeah.
It's why Elon Musk is a supervillain.
And it's the perfect recipe for creating a generation of depressed, demoralized, anxious people, you know, who think
are not
that
gonna have
the
kids.
entire world is doomed and that they have no hope of owning a home, having a family, or doing anything meaningful with their lives.
Yep. All of this. So then you have to wonder, it's hard to think about the idea of morality when you're that black-pilled about literally everything. And you're not even allowed to care about your own issues if you're a white person, because you have to care about everybody else's issues first.
If you care about your own, you're likely to get called names.
Yes, you're a white supremacist.
Exactly.
So let's go back to the original question. Human beings, are they? Because
Wait, what are our results so far?
51% say no.
Interesting how split
literally
this
just
is.
It literally just went to 51%. It was sitting at 50%. So guys, in the chat right now, if you're watching live, we asked you, do you believe that human beings are basically good? And it's split almost down the middle.
This is why I like doing polls that I know are going to be controversial for our audience.
So yeah.
Should we end the poll
Well,
or let it go?
I'm wondering, so do you believe that human beings are basically good?
Well, yeah, this was interesting that you brought it up because I saw last week Pope Francis did an interview on 60 Minutes, and it was very controversial because he said that people are fundamentally good. He said, yes, there are some rogues and sinners, but the heart itself is good. Now, it's just a translation, so maybe it's not a perfect one. But he said people are fundamentally good, and a lot of people said, like, this is heresy, whatever. But, like, that's at least what I was taught as a Catholic, is that people are fundamentally good, but we are fallen from original sin, and we are influenced by concupiscence. But God isn't capable of creating something that's fundamentally evil. That seems to make sense in my worldview.
I ended the poll. 50% say no, 49% say yes. Yes, those numbers never add up.
That's crazy.
Yep.
I'm surprised that you guys are so split. I want to hear your reasoning.
Yeah. Like when I think of this, I do come back to the idea that how much of society is good is good just because there's laws in place and those that enforce them. It's why I think that dystopian literature and dystopian movies and television are so fascinating to people, that once you remove the structures and the influences that keep people honest through force, and you watch what humans choose to do to themselves. There's a reason why when you watch The Walking Dead, as bad as the zombies are, it's usually another human being that's the biggest threat to you. And human beings have a fascination with wondering what the world would be like without those influences. It's why defund the police is such a fascinating thing to think about, because most of them are acting from a place of emotion because one bad thing happened and can't consider the idea of what the world would be like if there wasn't anyone there to enforce laws.
Interesting that Gen Z is less likely to believe that people are fundamentally good when they call criminals justice-impacted individuals.
Yeah. Well, it's because they believe that maybe they believe that people are inherently good, but the system is inherently flawed and evil. And I don't even necessarily disagree with that. I just think that it is your job and your responsibility to act as a good person, despite the fact that the government and politicians are evil and corrupt.
So what is your take? What did you vote?
I can't vote because
what would you have voted if you could?
It's too manipulative of a
You have
question
to. You have to pick one. You have to pick one.
You have to.
Being more of an optimist, I would like to believe that people are inherently good.
Okay.
I think a lot of it comes back to how you're raised and your family and who brings you up in the world.
But this is about the way people are born.
I would need to see more. I can't. It's too nuanced of a question for me.
Okay, Phil, what would you vote?
People are not inherently good. There is no such thing as good or bad. It's all subjective. If you don't believe in God, if you believe in God, then
at least you're consistent.
There's then there is moral.
That's more the point that I'm trying to make.
So like either there is God, which is the ultimate authority that's deciding morality, or there is no God, and it's up to men to decide the morality. And one morality or one moral framework is just as good as any other if that's the case. So
somebody says no fence sitting. No, I think that this is simply just something that's so complicated that I would rather see examples of, like, if we're talking about people who were raised in good families that then go on to be horrific criminals, that's more uncommon than somebody who comes from a broken home, no moral framework given to them growing up, who then goes on to predictably commit crimes and do things wrong. A lot of people today, I would imagine many in Gen Z would say they're a victim of circumstance.
We have a $20 from The Walking Dude. Over 20 years in the Army, I've seen the very worst and the very best in people all over the world. We all have the same wants and dreams. Most are just drawn into violence due to the powers that be.
See, but the thing is, that's what somebody in Gen Z would say. Well, yes, they killed your boyfriend, but it's because he was raised in foster care, and he never had any positive role models. So you should be lenient on him. The idea should be, just because your circumstances were bad does not give you a right to act outside of society's agreed upon moral framework, which is in America the law.
Well, I think the best people are those who are given the most and do the most with it.
To whom much is given, much is expected. Yeah. It's an interesting discussion. I hate the type of question that it asks for one answer with something that's that complicated. My brain can't wrap around just giving a yes or a no to something.
Well, if you don't have a religious framework, like, that makes
again,
sense, that there's not a clear answer.
I don't know if I would call myself I'm not a postmodernist, but I do think that there are at least aspects of relativism that come into play, even if I don't agree with it in practice.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.